My team and I oversee over 80 million in revenue as fractional CFOs, from businesses doing 30K a month all the way to doing 800K a month. And if there was one mistake that I had to point out that I see time and time again at every level, it is this: how the founders are paying themselves. That's why in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact framework that we use both to educate our clients on how to think about founder pay and how they should be extracting money from the business, but also the framework that we use to make sure that they're balancing both the growth of the business as their lifestyle, which it's often all about. So let's dive right in. First, I think it is important to start with some required mindset shifts, because if you're thinking wrong about the money your business is making and how much you should be taking out, no framework is going to help, because you're just going to do whatever the hell you want to do and pull out the money at a time when your business needed it most. So here are the 3 mindset shifts that you need to have before we go into this. One, that is that you most likely should be paid more. Especially you should be paid more than your team. It might sound obvious, and maybe this is already the case to you, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen founders just accept that they are the last in line, that they are not really taking any money if there is no profit, and that their team and their vendors and everyone else is getting paid, but they are not. And so that's why the first thing I want you to accept is that you should be paid. Yes, maybe if you're just going through a high growth phase, it is fine to reinvest that money. But in the long term, if you're not getting rich from the business, then what are you doing this for? So mindset shift 1, you should be paid more, at least more than your team, because you're the one taking all the risk. Number 2, that is data over opinions. I've been in countless discussions with founders over what the right amount is, or how much we should take out, or more important, how much should we keep in the business. But if you're having this discussion just on opinions, then what are you doing? You can't ever know just from the top of your head how much money you really have, because there's way too many moving pieces. There might be some vendors that still have their invoice outstanding, or there was this annual renewal that is coming up. And if you're just thinking oh, I have 50K in the bank account, I can take out 30, you might be taking out money that a business actually still needs. And so that is why when you're thinking about your money and how much you should take out, you should always do so from the numbers. So have good bookkeeping, have proper accounting, have a proper model that shows you where your cash currently is, what is still owed to you, and what you still owe to others. Only if you have the data can you even attempt to have a decent discussion about your numbers. That's mindset shift 2. Then number 3 is that cash flow is not the same as wealth creation. In this video, we're going to be talking a lot about the cash flow impact of you extracting money out of the business, but that doesn't mean that this is the only way you're going to get rich from your business. That is why it's still important to keep this distinction in mind, that sometimes it is better to pay yourself a little bit less, keep a little bit more in the business, so that you can actually reinvest more, build a really big business that then can be sold and that can give you actual wealth. Because just taking out this 10K a month, 20K a month, it's going to make you rich, it's not going to make you wealthy like a big exit can do. So keep that distinction in mind. All right, with that said, let's dive right in. How you should be paying yourself. I'll start with saying how you shouldn't be paying yourself, and that is randomly. And I see this so often. It's just 1 month, maybe just take out 1,000 because why not? Then the next month, all of a sudden take 20,000. Or my favorite is the one-time extraction of 60K because there's a new apartment or a one-time purchase that needs to happen, and it just out of nowhere drains the bank account. That is what not to do. Instead, this is what you should do, and this is how the top business owners pay themselves. And that is the structure of a base salary plus dividends. And that starts with your base salary. There's 3 things you need to keep in mind when setting your base. 1 is this should cover your lifestyle needs. Your rent, your groceries, a little bit of fun. That needs to be covered from your base salary. Otherwise, if you're building your business around, you relying on these dividends, these bigger extractions just to live your regular life, then again, what are you really doing this for? You're not getting the most out of your business. So make sure that your lifestyle needs are covered. That is the first rule for your base salary. Then the second thing is to optimize for your tax efficiency. Now, depends which country you are at. most countries have different thresholds where you're going to get a different implication for your taxes, where it might be better to either take out more dividends or fewer dividends. If you have any questions about this, just shoot me a message. We have partners in pretty much every country at this point who I can point you to if you want to know if you are actually optimizing your taxes at the same time. So that is rule number 2. Rule number 3 is to consider the market value of your replacement. That is especially for founders that are still a little bit earlier on and are still just doing the actual work in the business. Maybe you're still covering some clients, or you're still handling the sales, or you're still doing the marketing. Think from a bigger picture. If you had to completely step out and hire people to do all the work that you are doing, what would it cost you? That might be a 8K a month role, 10K a month role. You're not hiring someone necessarily to be the founder, but if you're actually just doing work that you could hire someone for, and if you want to sell the business, someone has to be hired for, then that is also a good criteria to look at. And that could mean that you should set your base salary at that similar value, so that if you had to hire someone, it's not all of a sudden going to mess with your profits, where it's like now you're looking super profitable, but just because you're doing all the work. So it's a good habit to pay yourself like you would pay somebody else, so that your profits are nice and smooth once you actually do hire someone. Then one quick tip here: if you are going to be budgeting for the dividends, as we'll talk about next, but also about tax payments, it is always good to set up multiple bank accounts for it. Most banks, like Mercury and all the modern banks, just let you have different checking accounts even. Just create a few different accounts where you can just put money in that you don't use. So every month you could put some money in the tax account, dividend account, so that you don't touch this, and it's actually just very clear what is in the checking and what you have to run the business. So that should be your base salary. It should meet these 3 criteria. That will get you very far. Then the more interesting bit, the dividends. This one depends on your preferences. How I like to see this is that, again, the business should be rewarding for you as the founder. Everyone has a different interpretation of the word rewarding. Some people, they want to extract as much cash as possible. Others, they want to reinvest more. And that is exactly why structuring your pay like this is perfect, no matter what your preference is, because you have your base salary, which just covers your needs, and now these dividends, they can just build up until you need it, or you can decide to reinvest this. And so the method that I like to use here is one of reverse engineering. And so what we always do is that we look at our clients and we see where do they want to get to. Maybe they want to double this year or triple the business this year, or maybe they want to have a bit of a transformation of the business and become a lot more profitable and become a leaner business. We map out from the numbers what would need to happen to get there. Maybe it's a price increase. Maybe it's a different sales channel that needs to be explored. Maybe it means leveraging AI more than investing in more people as they keep growing. That is what needs to be mapped out. Then we can see every month how much dividend should there be that can be set aside. And what I mean by that is just how much profit is there that you can set aside every month. Once you have that mapped out and you know this roadmap, then it just becomes a simple process of every month checking how do you compare to this plan that was set out. Maybe you've made more profits because things were even better than expected, or maybe you made a little bit less because things weren't panning out as we hoped. Then at least we have an expectation and a reality, and we can decide what to do based on that. So if we're doing better, we can set a little bit more aside into the dividend pot. If we did a little bit worse, we set a little bit less aside than we anticipated. That way, we know we're sticking to a plan and we're building these dividends every month. And then based again on what is rewarding to you, you can decide whether you want to take this dividend out just monthly with your regular pay. We have some clients that do that. Or what I prefer is to keep building these dividends at least for a quarter. And then at the end of the quarter, you can see whether you want to take this money out, or how much you want to take out, or how much you want to leave in there and then reinvest when the right opportunity comes up. And so how you can take this one step further is by really just breaking down your cost structure in these different buckets. And so here's one example for an agency where it is mapped out from this higher level of where every dollar goes in a business, whether this goes to account managers, the service team, any other costs, the internal team, general expenses, sales expenses, and then what is left for profit. And so this is what we talked about, where if you map this out, we can now measure every month, hey, did we have more than 25% or less? Where did we spend over the budget? Where did we come in under budget? And that way it becomes a very easy process to just siphon off that money into the dividend bank account on a monthly basis. So that is how you can figure out the difference. Reverse engineer your goals, figure out how much you should be able to take out, and then adjust based on what truly happens. And then when opportunities come up, either in your personal life that require more money or in the business that require more money, then you have that pot sitting there, which you know you don't need for anything else. So that is the dividend side. Then I want to have a final note here on some general rules to keep the business healthy, because the downside of this method is that there is nothing that stops you from just using those dividends for whatever you see fit. And I've seen cases where it becomes very tempting to just take that money because now you actually have money and you can spend it. And so there's often nothing stopping you from indeed spending this money. And so here are some rules that you can follow to make sure that no matter what happens, the business still succeeds. So the first method here is a 3-month rule. And that means that you should know exactly what your average spend is per month and then keep 3 months of that in cash. That is your safety buffer. That is your war chest. That is the money that you don't touch. So even if you're building up these dividends, you want this to build up over 3 months of expenses. That way, if there's anything that goes wrong, a supplier runs out on you, or a bank account gets blocked, your payment processor gets blocked, something happens on the marketing side, whatever happens, if you have 3 months of expenses saved up, you can still function in the business. You can still operate. Now, of course, if you're growing very fast and you need to constantly reinvest, this is sometimes easier said than done. But it doesn't mean that you just need to have this tomorrow. It means that this is the level that you should aspire to. So here in this case study, that's a perfect example of how you can do it. This was from a founder who wanted to increase his personal pay, but also build this safety net at the same time. And so what we did here is create a 12-month plan, much like we discussed on the last page, where we just figured out how much can we still take out of the business personally that would still leave enough money to also build up that safety net. And so yes, it takes a little bit longer, but this way, in a safer way and in a way that still balances, being able to grow quickly, taking out more money and building that safety net, we found the right balance to just slowly increase the personal spend, slowly keep building the war chest while keeping the business, really focused on the right activities. So you don't have to have this right now, but this is what you should be building towards, as this is just what a healthy business looks like. Then, of course, the other two things, adjust for upcoming expenses. If you know stuff is going to come up, a big purchase, a big change, a new investment that you want to pursue, you should adjust for that. So if you know that right now you might be very profitable at 40% margins, but that's just because you are doing a lot of the work, and you know that from, in 2 months time, you want to make a couple hires to get you out of the business, you should already prepare for that. Try save up a little bit more money because your cost base is going to increase dramatically. And so you want to make sure you're still keeping to that 3-month rule. So adjust for those upcoming expenses. Don't just look back on what happened. And then the last one, weekly cash monitoring. This is what we do for our clients. It's very important to just have a very close grip on what's happening with your money, because you'd be surprised how many random things just keep slipping through the cracks if you don't. So those are the rules. That is how you make sure that you're paying yourself right, that it's rewarding for you, but also that your business can still keep growing quickly. If you want any help with this, whether it's just from the bookkeeping side to make sure that you actually can see how much you're making, or whether your business will already benefit from the more strategic help to actually figure out how can we be more profitable, how can we grow, how can we reverse engineer these goals, then you can book a call directly with me. There will be a link here in the description. I'll have to just chat. I'll see what we can do for you. If there's any good fit, then I'll give you a quote right away. But I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if so, and I'll see you in the next one.